The year is 1845. British artillery positions overlook a wooden fort on a Māori hilltop called Ohayaway. Commander Henry Dapard studies it through his telescope. Wooden palisades. No stone. No metal reinforcements. His guns have leveled castles in India. This should take an afternoon. He orders the bombardment to begin. 3 days later, Dapard will write the most humiliating report of his career. The British Empire had conquered a quarter of the world using a simple formula: artillery creates breaches, infantry exploits them, superior discipline wins the day. This formula had worked against Mughal armies, African kingdoms, and Chinese forts. It was about to fail completely. The first cannonballs slam into the Ohayaway Pa. Wood explodes into splinters. Whole sections of palisade disintegrate. British officers nod with satisfaction. By tomorrow, they'll be inside. But something strange happens overnight. When dawn breaks, the Pa looks more dangerous than before. The Maori haven't repaired the walls. They've turned the destruction into obstacles. Shattered posts create jagged barriers. The breaches are now kill zones filled with debris that forces attackers to slow down and bunch together. Dapard doesn't understand what he's seeing. European fortifications become weaker when damaged. This one seems to be adapting. He orders the infantry assault anyway. The British soldiers advance in formation, confident in their training. They've done this dozens of times. Reach the breach, push through, overwhelm the defenders with superior numbers and discipline. Captain Grant leads the first wave through the largest gap in the palisade. He makes it 5 meters inside before realizing the breach is a trap. The Pa isn't one wall, it's a maze of defensive layers. Grant's men are now trapped between 2 palisades, exposed on 3 sides. Maori warriors fire from elevated positions he didn't know existed. His soldiers can't form defensive lines. They can't retreat without exposing their backs. They can't advance without climbing over debris while under fire from multiple angles. Men fall in clusters. The survivors try to push deeper, thinking they'll find cover. Instead, they find another defensive layer, another carefully designed kill zone. Within minutes, Grant's assault force has 40% casualties. He orders retreat. The second wave fares worse. The Maori have adapted to British tactics in real time, repositioning to cover the new approach. When those soldiers retreat, they leave behind more bodies than the first wave. By afternoon, Dapard has lost 45 men killed and 80 wounded. The Pa's garrison of about 100 warriors has suffered 6 casualties. These aren't the casualty ratios of European warfare. In successful assaults, attackers expect roughly equal losses. Here, British forces are bleeding at 20-1 ratios. Dapard calls off the assault. In his report, he'll write carefully diplomatic sentences that translate to, "We have superior weapons, training, and numbers, but we cannot take this position without losing most of our force." What the British didn't understand. They weren't fighting primitive fortifications. They were fighting the end product of 500 years of combat evolution. Maori tribes had been perfecting Pa design through constant warfare long before Europeans arrived. Every battle taught lessons. Every tactical innovation was tested in actual combat. The fortifications British forces encountered in the 1840s had been refined through generations of military necessity. The genius started with a philosophical difference. European forts were designed to be impregnable build walls so strong the enemy can't get through. Maori Pa were designed around a different principle: make the attack so costly that victory becomes meaningless. This shift changed everything. Pa weren't built to take 0 damage. They were built to remain lethal while damaged. Posts were spaced precisely so artillery couldn't knock down multiples at once, but infantry couldn't slip through gaps. When cannonballs did hit, the posts shattered into sharp obstacles that made approach routes more dangerous. The terrain selection was masterful. Every Pa sat on elevated ground with clear fields of fire in all directions. Attackers advanced uphill, exposed, unable to find cover. But the real sophistication was in the layered defense: multiple palisades creating interlocking kill zones where every position was covered by fire from multiple angles. British military doctrine had no answer for this. Their tactics assumed fortifications became weaker with damage. Pa became more dangerous. After Ohaeway, the pattern repeated across New Zealand. At Ruapakapika, British forces spent weeks in careful siege only to discover the Maori had evacuated through hidden routes when victory became inevitable, making the entire costly operation strategically meaningless. At Ohaeway, a different engagement. Another frontal assault ended with British casualties so severe that officers refused to order their men forward again. The British military machine that had crushed sophisticated armies worldwide couldn't solve wooden fortifications on New Zealand hilltops. New orders went out to commanders: do not assault well-defended Pa. Use siege tactics. Offer negotiation. Bypass when possible. Read that again. The most powerful military force in the world officially admitted that indigenous wooden fortifications couldn't be taken by direct assault without prohibitive losses. That's not a tactical adjustment. That's a strategic defeat. Some British officers studied Pa design and proposed adopting the principles. The proposals were rejected not because they wouldn't work, but because admitting indigenous engineering exceeded European methods was politically impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. Maori Pa had solved fundamental problems of defensive warfare that European doctrine hadn't fully addressed. How to defend against artillery without stone or metal. How to create fortifications that improved under fire. How to make conquest economically unsustainable for wealthy empires. These weren't theoretical solutions. They worked against the best military force in the world. The British eventually conquered New Zealand, but it took decades longer than any reasonable military calculation suggested. Not because Maori had better weapons or more soldiers, but because they understood defensive warfare more deeply than European military academies. Wooden posts defeated steel cannons through design intelligence. Today, military historians recognize Maori Pa as one of history's most sophisticated defensive systems. West Point and Sandhurst teach about Vauban's fortresses and medieval castles. They should teach about Pa because the Pa system solved problems of asymmetric defense that modern militaries still struggle with. How do you defend against superior force using limited resources? The Maori answered that question definitively, and the British Empire learned it the hard way. Sometimes the people without engineering degrees understand warfare more deeply than empires with all their resources. The fortress that should have fallen never did because it was designed by warriors who knew something European military science had forgotten. In warfare, sophistication isn't about who has the best weapons. It's about who understands combat more deeply.